All right, are we ready to do this thing?
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of disclaimers going on here. I have notes to myself all over my front page. Too much information for 7 days. And I crossed it out. No, it went okay last year. However,
We don't have 7 days.
this is 419. Test scores for the turbo section were terrible. 36% missed on each question. Also, Larry does exhaust and intake systems. So, I'm telling you now. Yeah. It's one of these things where turbos is actually pretty easy, I think. But you have to really stop and think about what is it doing, how does it work. You can't just absorb it and go, I'm sure I'll figure it out when I get to the test. All right, but one of the things about this week that I want to cover, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's somewhat review, and Larry's going to cover a lot of this stuff in your second year, but it's part of the systems we're talking about. So I'm not going to write up notes and stuff about this. I just want to go over it. And then I think I can spend more time working on turbos, but I will tell you that it's on the test. So you're going to want to make sure that you pay attention, even though I'm kind of going quickly. So first thing we're going to talk about is magnetos. Now I think with the exception of one person has an excuse, who hasn't had electricity yet. Everybody else, two?
Yeah.
Two. So, okay, shall we lump everybody in who didn't pass electricity? Okay, there we go.
Make me feel a little better.
All right. So the exception of one or two of you that passed electricity, the rest of you, this is not review. It's okay. So a magneto, what would we describe a magneto as? Not a starting system for sure. Ignition system. A self-contained ignition system. It doesn't need anything externally. No battery power. No whatever else. I ran out of stuff. No battery power. As long as you turn it, it's going to work. So it's self-contained. It's a small AC generator that has a transformer inside that is going to step up voltage to somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 volts. So when it kind of snaps and it hurts, it's because it's supposed to. It's 20,000 volts. All right, so it's an AC generator. Every single engine used to have two. Times are changing. So Lycoming is a little different in some of their engines, like the IO360 A1B6D. If it ends in D in that last designation, then it is a dual magneto, which means it's one magneto that runs both sides. So dual magneto is one magneto, but all the other engines have dual magnetos, which means they have one on each side. So you got that? So dual magneto is one magneto, but the other engines that have two magnetos run dual mags. Okay. So if you got one of these, you need two. But if you have the dual mag, you just need one. Let's see. I don't think I put a picture of it. I know. So, when in doubt, specify. Do you mean an engine with two mags or an engine with one mag? There's nothing wrong with that. So, because the dual mag, the one that runs them both, is called a D3000. D being dual. Want to see a picture? Want to see an actual one?
Just the one shot.
All right. These are condensers sticking out the side. They don't belong there. They belong in the cap, but it's just a good place to store them. So one magneto runs both sides.
Dual mag.
So it's a dual mag. So it's got dual rotor, one rotor, and everything else is the same. I mean, wow. One rotor, one drive, everything else has two. Two caps, two distributors, two coils, two sets of points, two everything else, which is fine. So if you had one coil failed, well, you'll lose half of it. So it works great until you lose a drive shaft. Then you lose everything. Well, it used to be kind of that's the way it was. You either had two of these, either Bendix or Slick. Those are the two flavors they come in. No other flavors. Bendix or Slick, you have two of them. Or you had the dual magneto. This is a D2000. Now they have the D3000. That is an AD, says you can't use it anymore because it has a magnesium case. The magnesium it burns real well. It warped. And when it warped, it locked up the shaft. And when it locked up the shaft, doesn't work. If you have now we are getting into retrofitting electronic ignition into our aircraft. There are many, Surefly I think is one of the more popular ones. There are a couple of different companies where you can take off one of these magnetos and put an electronic one on, but you need battery to operate that. So you need an alternator that runs in the battery that works and all that stuff. I believe there are some companies now that are actually doing an STC where you can take both of them off and put Sureflies on. Yeah.
Was the one only limiting you to take one mag so that you had a mag as a redundancy?
A redundancy that didn't require a battery. Because if you lost a...
Isn't that dangerous, though, to go to two electronic if you don't have that redundant where it's...
I have not read the STC. There may be a backup battery required.
Okay.
I don't actually know on that one.
I would assume that would be really sketchy because you lose that battery,
Yeah, you're dead.
you're dead.
Yeah, you're
Something like that, dual systems, like dual distribution wires, dual
dual everything.
So what's the advantage of having the Surefly over just?
There are a lot of advantages. Number one, these magnetos right here require a 500-hour inspection. It is a few parts short of an overhaul. Slick magnetos, you might as well just throw them away at 500, buy a new one. Same with just get new overhauled ones, or I just send mine back, get new ones, put them on. So they're only good for 500 hours. And then they need an overhaul when the engine needs overhaul. So, but basically you can figure every 500 hours you're just overhauling them. Moving parts, points, condensers, points arc. So you have the overhaul periods. With the electronic ignition, you can program it to do spark advance. I'm a little out on this one because if you take off one of your mags and you put on an electronic and you do the setup that allows it to do spark advance, it's going to fire before this one. So this one's now going to be a little late. And so you're really only running on one set of spark plugs, which the engine wasn't designed to do. They designed it to fire at the same time and figure the flame front. So I'm a little out on that one. And knowing too, when you shut off one magneto, all your EGTs go up. So,
Well, isn't that just like the Continental in the lab because it's timed at 2830?
yeah, that one's that way because of uneven distribution. So one side of it's too leaner than the other side, and they kind of figured that out. So, it's a little leaner. So if we fire this one, then this one, it'll meet in the middle.
Do you have to time the electronic ones, or is it...
It's still going to run for the supplemental type certificate. They're different. It's like you time them at top dead center, and then you put it in at top dead center, and then you tell it where you have dip switches, and you tell it where it's supposed to fire at advance, and whether or not you're using the spark advance or not using the spark advance. So I was going to get one for my airplane, and I thought I'll just not spark advance it, and then I'll just run them both at whatever, not tied to the center, wherever mine, I forget what my 28 or something on my airplane. Just run them right there, and so that way I would have one magneto that get changed out every 500 hours, and then the electronic ignition is good till overhaul of the engine. So they're good for it. But I read a lot of stories, people saying, I don't like it, I'm on my third or fourth one, it keeps failing. I'm like, well, I don't want that. So still a little unsure about that. Okay, so we've got either two Bendix or two Slicks. I never see a Bendix and a Slick. Or the dual mag. If you're running a Rotax and it's completely different, Rotax has a self-contained electronic ignition or an ignition system contained in it. Now they're electronic, but it's got a giant flywheel. It's got a flywheel in the back with magnetic pickups. Works. It's a magneto basically. It's what it is back there, but it's just big one. and with pickups on it. And so you can't take it off. It's part of the house. Take the housing off and then it's internal. So, all right. So we got these magnetos. And your job is to put them on. Now you can write this down. 3 steps to installing a magneto. 4 steps. I increased it to 4. Step 1 is put the engine where it's supposed to fire. 3 steps, 4 steps to timing a magneto. 4 steps to installing a magneto. 1. Put the engine where it's supposed to fire. Put the engine where, I'll be more specific, number 1 cylinder should fire. And where is that typically going to happen?
Before top dead center.
Before top dead center is exactly correct. Somewhere between 30 to 25 is pretty common. Where are we going to find out where that is exactly? Flower pot will not tell you. What data are we looking for?
Type certificate.
Data, TCDS, type certificate data sheet. What else?
Overhaul
Data
manual.
plate.
A data plate. What else?
Ordering gear.
Nope, wouldn't trust it. We're looking for data. Where it literally says. Okay.
Some POHs have it.
Overhaul manual. Some has a P, it's the I don't think the POH, it's the it's not the pilot operating handbook, it's the engine operating book, which is confusing. So overhaul manual, we'll put service bulletin, service instruction, M-0 manual. That's for Lycoming. I'm sorry, Continental. Continental's the M0 manual. And that it says manual, M-A-N-U-A, whatever. All right, so these are some good sources right here. We have to be a little careful with the data plate. It should be accurate. But there have been times where an AD has come out that said if you have these cylinders, you have to detune it a little bit, so that it should be X'd out, and they'll put the lower timing. Continental 200s are this way. And then different cylinders came out, and they removed the AD and said, okay, if you have, or change the AD, if you have these cylinders, you can go back up. So you may have a bunch of numbers stamped on a data plate. So I'm a little hesitant to trust it, but it should be correct. So trust but verify. All right. Be careful because like Lycoming overhaul manual does not have it. Not Lycoming. It is not in the overhaul manual. There's directions on how to do it, and it gives numbers like turn the propeller backwards to. It's
20
like
or 25, I believe.
it's just turn it backwards to like 20 degrees, and then bring it forward until you get the right degree. And everybody goes, "Oh, it's a 20." Like it didn't say 20. It said go backwards to 20 and then forward to the correct number. What is the correct number? You saw 20 and you stopped. So be careful what you're doing. So all right, so we're going to look up this data. And we'll just go 25 since we have 2 Lycomings we're working on. It's just 25. So there it is, 25 degrees before top dead center. And we can pick that number and go. All right, 1, put the engine where number 1 cylinder should fire. That means we're going to find top dead center of compression stroke. Number 2, put the magneto where it fires number 1 cylinder, which is the points just opened. The points just opened. Well, we could back up just a little bit here and talk about this. All right, so putting the engine where it should fire on the number 1 cylinder. There's many ways to put the engine where it should fire on number 1 cylinder. If you have a Lycoming, this is called a starter ring gear support assembly. See this little steel piece up here with the teeth on it? That's called a starter ring gear. All this aluminum stuff is called a starter ring gear support. Put together, it's called a starter ring gear support assembly. This is marked in two places. You cannot trust the numbers on it until you have verified with data that the numbers are correct. Because it says right there, sorry you can't see it, like top dead center is right there. That says 20 and 25 over here. So you have to make sure that you're on the right thing. Just because it's stamped 25, a lot of them are just 25, doesn't mean somebody didn't go to the salvage yard, pick up a starter ring gear support assembly and throw it on there and it's got the wrong number on it. So be very careful with that. So all right, so we can just simply put this starter ring gear support. It has numbers right here, right there. It says top center. Somewhere over here it says like 25 degrees. That's maybe 20 right there. So you pick that, and over here there's going to be the starter goes here, and there's a little tiny hole that seems to be drilled into the starter for no reason whatsoever. It's about maybe a number 40 hole. That little hole that seems to have no reason whatsoever, you could put a piece of like welding rod or something, but it lines up with those numbers. And then on the back of this, you would have like 25 degrees, which lines up with the backbone of the engine. And once you verified, in our case, it's 25, those numbers are legitimate. And verify, because how many ways could you put this on?
Infinite
Not infinite, it'd be 6 different ways.
6 different ones.
In theory, 6 different ways, but see that right there? There's a little O right there. You can't see it at all now. There's a little O right there. When the propeller, the flange bushings are installed in the prop flange of the Lycoming, they're supposed to be different sizes. There should be 5 of one and one that's different. It's called the indexing one. And that O represents where it's supposed to go. When you're working on the Lycoming that you guys are installing on your test stand, they're just bushings were thrown in there. We don't have enough of the right ones to set it up correctly. So you would have 6 different ways to install this gear. What?
You were like, one should be different, and I was like,
Yeah, one should be different. And it also indexes to the propeller too. It helps keep the propeller on correctly. So anyway, what you do is you bring the engine to top dead center compression stroke of number 1. You verify that you're on top dead center of compression stroke of number 1, and make sure that this TC mark lines up with the hole in the starter and on the other side where you can't see it. Then you verify that this is installed correctly. Otherwise, you're going to be off by quite a bit. All right. Another way to do it, we have one of these, Time Right. I think they're kind of cool. I won't get too much into it because I would explain it all and be like, huh? They use a pin that I think the next picture shows. No. They use a pin that just rubs, it sits on the piston, and you bring it up, and as you bring the piston up, it's going to move this, slide this up and down. So they're cool. You guys got to use one, but like I said, it was you got to get the right rod, and it tells you which end is up, and yeah, and up is in reference to when this is to the right, and it's just you're like, what? You have to do it a lot before you do it. Then the flower pot method, which you guys are all experiencing, so I don't need to go into that, is another way to do it. And for those of you that need more of a visual representation, the reason why with the flower pot we can't just put our finger in the hole and bring the prop around until it feels like the piston is at top dead center is because there's a lot of crankshaft movement when the piston is at top dead center. I don't know, what, 5 degrees or more either which way probably that you could be off, and there's almost no movement of that piston. So you can't find top dead center. You've got to find it out here somewhere where when the crankshaft throw is coming around, a little bit of movement of the crankshaft throw actually moves the piston back and forth, and the piston comes. And all right, so what we're doing is we're using a dead stop. And so we put it in the cylinder, And what we're doing is we're finding this what they call it, arc of denial. That's it. I called it something, a zone of confusion, I guess. This arc of denial. So what it is the piston isn't allowed to go in this spot right here. Right? You're bringing the piston around to a few degrees before top dead center, and you come back around and a few degrees before top dead center. So you got this whole section where the piston actually never went. The crankshaft couldn't go through that spot. And so you're just figuring out, that's why you get the degrees, divide by 2, and well, the middle is top dead center. If you've done it, you know what I'm talking about. So word of caution when using the dead stop, it doesn't have to be screwed all the way in, but you got to screw it in enough so that it's not floating around and moving and has enough threads that you're not popping it out. It's probably best if you screw it all the way in. That way it doesn't have any wiggle to it and you get more accuracy. Also, I think most of you guys are being very careful. Don't slam the piston into it. It's just not healthy for it. All right, another way to do it, the big bore Continentals, this was a service bulletin that came out that said, you have to remove this plate. See that plate right there? And I'll enlarge it some more. This plate is mounted to the rear of the engine. This is the starter adapter gear assembly. So it's a whole assembly you can pull out. It's rather large. This is the starter right here. This is actually the edge of the starter right here. The flange that it mounts to. And so you have this plate right here. And you can see top dead center, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. It's marked pretty clearly. And you can see right there how this shiv on here has got a hash. It's actually been hit with like a chisel or something. A mark has been put in there, and then they put the little red mark on there. Well, this particular shiv has a keyway on, so it can only go on the shaft one way, so that you can't screw up that mark and get it in the wrong spot. But it goes on a gear that's got 15 or 20 teeth that has 20 different ways that it can go engage into the gear that's inside of the engine. So what was happening is, and these starter adapters can be problematic because of the way it's a 90-degree drive that goes with the gear that winds up around a sprocket and a worm gear. And anyway, so you have to have these overhauled occasionally. So people would get them back, and they just slide it in and be off 1 tooth or 20 teeth. Well, the problem really comes in when you're off by just a few teeth, and it tricks you. So you go around, you pop out the number 1 spark plug, put your thumb over it, you bring it around. Oh, yep, it's on compression. It's definitely on compression. Look at the back of the engine. You stop, you bring your prop around until this is right there at top dead center. And then you bring it around, back it up, and you go, okay, I want it right there at 28. Bring it right to 28. Throw your mags on. Set it up with your time right. You're perfect. You never really stop to verify, is the piston at top dead center when it was a top dead center? It's not, because you're off by a couple of teeth, but it was so close that you didn't notice. So say instead of putting it at 28, you really kind of put it at like 34 degrees, 36 degrees before top dead center. What happens to the engine?
It doesn't rotate, it just stops.
You button it up and send it offline.
Once it gets
Will it fly
Well, I think it's stuck.
at 34 degrees?
Yeah, it's well advanced.
Detonation.
I was going to detonate like a son of a bitch. And that happened. People were dying. And there was no doubt that this red mark was lined up perfectly where it was supposed to be. But what was wrong?
The teeth on the back.
Teeth inside. You couldn't do it. So Continental's response to that was take this plate off and throw it away. We don't want them on an engine anymore. Now, thankfully, my engine still has it. And I use it. But what do you have to do before you use it?
Make sure connector is in the right.
Make sure top center's top center. So it's not hard. I mean, this time you can put your finger in and kind of go, it's top center. I took a flower pot home, stuck the thing in, put the flower pot on the front, did the whole thing, found top dead center. Okay, there's top dead center. Walk around the back of the engine. Look at that. My red mark was perfectly on top dead center. Then I used the flower pot on the front, put it exactly where I wanted it, walk around the back just to make sure. Yep, exactly where I wanted it. Good. Take the flower pot off. I don't ever need it again because this is perfect. It's fine until I take that starter adapter out. But it works. You just have to think things through before you assume that they're right. Just like with the starter ring gear support assembly on the Lycoming, don't assume that top center is where it's supposed to be. First verify it. Once it's verified, you have a usable tool.
Kevin, how do you still have yours on? Well, they said they don't want any.
Service bulletin.
Oh, okay.
People don't always comply with service bulletins.
Oh.
Or the engine shop that built it was like, we understand why it's there. It really makes it life a lot easier. So if you understand why it's there, what it's about, I still think they're a good thing to do. So, all right, blowing a picture. Talked about that. All right, so next thing is we put the engine where we want it. By the way, I don't have pictures. There's other ways to do it. You should know that the small Continentals that you're going to get a chance to, on the flange, numbers are right on that flange. They're just on the bottom. If you want to cheat, turn it upside down so it's on the top. When top dead center is lined up with the top of the case, you're on bottom dead center. Just set your time right up, put it bottom dead center, boom, you're done. The per mold engines for Continental, they have that starter adaptive starter drive that goes up front. So cylinder, 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 starter. Well, that means that starter is going off a gear that's 90 degrees to the crankshaft. So the crankshaft has a gear bolted to it that drives the alternator. That gear inside the engine has timing marks on it. You're just going to look for an oil plug on the top of the engine. It's like, why would they put an oil drain plug up here? Pull it out, rotate it around, you're going to find it. So it has marks on it for timing. And a pointer. It's kind of cool.
What do you mean when you say per mold?
Continental has two types of engines in the big bores, the 470s, 520s, per mold and sandcast. They expect you to know these names. That's why I use them. It'd be nice if they didn't. So the sandcast is the old style. They could have just said the ones without an alternator drive on it. And you go, oh, the ones without an alternator drive. Well, how do you drive the alternator? Just bolt it to the back and run a belt. Right there. There's the belt. There's the alternator. That's a sandcast. Then you got the per mold. They could have just said the one that has the internal driven alternator. Like, oh, internal driven. No, they want to be real fancy about that. So if you look at a per mold engine, it's going to look like 3 cylinders and a smaller one. Was that a trolling motor? Without anything on. We go cylinder, 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 alternator. They all bolt on kind of the same. The other side's got 3. So, all right, but Lycomings are all with the starter ring gear support. Okay, number 2, we're going to put the magneto where it goes. Okay, so now we're dealing with basically 2 types of mags, Bendix or the slick. So, which one am I going to talk about first? We'll talk about the Bendix first. Should know this if you built one. There's a red tooth. That's why I'm cautioning you when you guys built the magnetos last year. I'm like, don't put red all over the teeth. You got to have one clear red tooth for the person putting it together. So you're just going to look at this window and you're going to find the red tooth. And when you find the red tooth, it is
Ready to fire.
ready to fire. Which one? Number 1 cylinder. Okay. And for those of you who built it, you know that there is a neutral position where it won't rotate, right? It locks in. What's the problem with the red tooth in the neutral?
10 degrees off.
They're 10 degrees offset. So when I put this in the neutral position, for neutral positions where the magnet holds it in place, this is going to fire 10 degrees later pretty much. So if I put it in the neutral position where it's held nice and still, I'm 10 degrees off from where it should fire. So if I turn it just for that little red tooth in the window and let go, it won't stay. So there's your problem. So you got to think about it, and you got to, okay, so I'm going to put it in the neutral position, and then I'm going to have to turn it this way. So you're going to put it in just a little bit too much this way, and then turn it that way until the light just comes on. Do you follow that? So you're actually going to put it in a little bit and turn it. Because you can't put the red tooth in the window with the light on and let go, because it goes. So you just got to think it through. It's easy with something like this. It has a lot of room to move. It is not easy with something like this. It has very little room to move. So you have to think ahead. We'll grab another magneto. Okay, so there's my red tooth, right? So this barely turns. There's no neutral. But let's just say I got to put it in, and I know I got to turn it just a little bit this way to get the light to come on, right? So put it in neutral, so it stays put. And now I got to turn it a little bit this way. So I'm going to put it in so I'm crowding the stud on this side and put it in just a little bit. You follow? Yep. So the stud should go. Try and get it so the stud goes right here on this side, and then when you turn it to the lights come on, you'll be somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's this way though. If you have right, left mags, they're going to be a little different. So you got to think that through, plan it out, stick it in. Well, somebody, super genius, I think I already told you this story, said, well, wait a minute. You got to go through all that trouble to put it in the neutral position and kind of give it that little click. What if we just went in there with a tool that just grabbed hold of that rotor and put it in the right spot, right, held it right in the middle? See, because it's not in the middle. It's a little offset. It should be right there in the middle. Well, let's make that tool. Well, there you go. They made a tool. Did I tell you about these? And you just screw it right in there, and it just grabs hold of that little plastic tooth. No problems whatsoever, yes?
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Breaks up.
You put any stress at all on that gear, and you will crack the gear tooth. And if that tooth cracks and breaks off, this quits. If this quits, that side quits. I told you we did a set of mags for a Skymaster, twin engine aircraft. We did all four. Out of all four, the pilot came back with one magneto running. So he had one dead engine and one about to die, and that had a cracked tooth because the mechanic who installed it, they've already seen all that. So used these right here. We do have some that are made out of some sort of latex or something. They're very flexible. We ordered some, so if somebody really wanted to, I could get them out.
Go into the window.
They'll go into the window and you put enough pressure. Now, for those who say, I'm smart enough guy, I can use these, there won't be a problem. I submit to you an entire handful of slick pins that I have that are bent like this. So, all right, so put the magneto where it's supposed to fire. If it's a Bendix, you put the red tooth in it. So for you people that are doing the mags on the Continental, it's all right. Put it top dead center number one. You put it top dead center number one. I just walk by and I just look right in the window like that and see if I see a red tooth. If I don't, I know you screwed up. You should verify that. Double check your work. All right, slicks. Got a picture of a slick? Well, you got slicks. Yeah. Slicks. Slicks, you can't see a red tooth. You're going to put a pin in the hole. If the magneto rotates to the left when viewed from the drive end, because remember, if I say it's a left-hand anything, it's when viewed from the drive end. Anybody who says it's from the pilot's perspective
Is wrong.
is wrong. I was going to say something like, I get to hit your fingers with a ball peen hammer or something. That's a little harsh, isn't it?
Warmed up.
I would never do that.
No.
I want to, but I'd never do it. There's two different things.
Thinking it and doing it.
Yeah. Some of you are a little meaner than I am. Smack me back, asking for it. So I don't want that to happen. Okay, so any accessory, magneto, try to think, alternator, fuel pump, governor. The direction of rotation is when viewed from the drive end. Okay, so if it turns to the left, it's this way. If it turns to the right, it's that way. It's going to turn it around. So this LRX references the direction of rotation, not which side of the engine it goes on. Because it doesn't care what side of the engine it goes on. All right, so if it turns to the left, you're going to put it to the L. Turns to the right, you put it to the right. It fits. What goes in the X? Laser ignition. Okay. Put the pin in. Make sure you're very careful with the pin. I do it on a table. Set the magneto down. I rotate it backwards and kind of feed the pin in and out because the finger is going to cut the thing that points to the cylinder that's going to fire is in there. And if you leave the pin in there, it's going to come around and I won't snap it. It'll just bend it over like that because this is what's going around inside there. And then you're going to come and go, Kevin, I can't get the pin out. I don't know what happened. I think it was the last group. No,
Definitely was the last
it left in the last
It's
group.
always the last.
Yeah. And so what you're doing is you're dropping that pin in here. And these holes will correspond to the left, the right, and the X. And if you notice, there's a different distance between here and here on each one. And if you notice over here, there's a different distance between here on each one. So what, the furthest from the center would be the left. Furthest from the center would be the left. So that'd be this one. So this must be the left hole right here. And guess what magneto, guess which rotation this one was? You can see all the scratch marks. Yeah, so this was a left-hand mag. Was. But then somebody got the pin. Then you got to take the whole thing apart, straighten the pin out to get it out. So I have a rule myself, my rule, when I do magnetos. Put the pin in, set it where it's supposed to go, walk up to the engine, put it on the engine, and take the pin out. That fast. Do not leave the pin in there. All you have to do is turn the mag a little bit this way, or somebody wants to help you with the prop, which you're doing, and that's what you get. And if it's an airworthy mag, you get to rebuild the whole mag. So, there we go. All right. Put the magneto where it fires at number 1. The point's just open. Okay, so we either have the red tooth, or we have the pin. And if you have a magneto that's on the right side of the engine, which hole do you put it in?
Whichever rotation.
That's it. Depends on which way it rotates. I don't care if it's right or left. All right. 3. What's number 3? Put them together. Put the mag on. Put the mag.
Mate.
Put the magneto on. 4. Fine tune. Which is just a matter of twisting it in its spot. You shouldn't have to take it off ever again at this point. Just twist it to the little left, a little bit to the right, and you should be just fine. Let me see.
Kevin,
Yeah.
on a Bendix, is it always you put the red tooth in the middle and then the 11 o'clock position is going to be the last firing? On the where the harness goes, where the leads go?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's always
Yep.
11 o'clock.
Yep. It's, as far as I know, it's always that spot right there. Let me see. Bendix. Left. Got that. Verify and adjust timing. Of course, we use the buzz box. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Be careful with those buzz boxes. Okay. Magnetos. A reminder. What is on the back of this magneto? An impulse coupling. An impulse coupling has 2 jobs: to make the spark hot and late. So when you set the red tooth where it's supposed to fire and you put it in the engine, that's all fine and well until the impulse coupling dog catches. Now it's engine's going to turn and the magneto is not going to turn until you turn it past 25 degrees, and then the impulse coupling snaps and it makes it spin real fast. So at that point, it's going to fire at top dead center. It holds the magneto still until the magneto, or until the engine gets to top dead center, then it fires it. It does that for starting purposes. And then once the engine starts, because of centrifugal force, it's going to pull these little dogs in, and it no longer snaps. It just runs like a normal one. Follow? So those impulse couplings can really mess with you when you're trying to time an engine. Just remember it's there. If the points aren't opening, well, maybe you got the impulse coupling connected there. It'll make more sense when we get to magnetos. But if we have 2 magnetos, one has an impulse and one does not, the starting magneto always, as far as I know, goes on the left. Now, I've never read anywhere it says it has to go on the left. You could probably put it on the right. You'd be just fine, except your key is wired to do that. So when you go right, left, both start, when you're in the start position, it kills the right magneto, so only the left one is operating. So if you have starting one magneto with an impulse, it's going to go on the left side. Okay.
We just put a placard on the magneto.
Just placard it. Yeah, just please
Oh
start.
yeah,
one.
yeah, from the pilot's view, right?
What?
The left. The key.
Generally speaking, yes, as long as the engine's in front of you. What if you have a Skymaster where it's behind you, or any pusher airplane? Then it's the pilot's perspective when he's facing this way or facing this way.
Facing forward.
The manual will tell you the left side of the engine is from the mechanic's perspective, standing behind at the accessory case. Propeller up front, you here.
Okay.
So the Skymaster with the engine that's backwards, it's you standing this way backwards. Props over there, mags here.
And left.
This is the left, that's the right. So it's not a pilot's thing, it's mechanic's perspective when standing behind the engine. What I was going to say with those buzz boxes, every time you snap that impulse coupling, you're shooting 1,000 volts through your impulse coupling. That's why the lights flicker on you. It's not good for them. Try not to do that.
Definitely broke one.
Huh? Definitely broke one. That's what happened to it. Yeah, don't do that. Stop. Yeah, stop snapping them. I know somebody in here was like, "Well, the light comes on whenever it snaps." Well, it does flash. I'll give you that, because because it's a step-up transformer, and I forget. What did we figure? How much did it go up? Anybody remember? How many turns? Several thousand turns. I don't know. It's close to 1,000 volts you're putting through it. Don't do that. This part is not on the test, but I will tell you this. For those of you who remember, every now and then you'll be putting a magneto on with slots. And you put it on, and you try and time it, and it whacks into the stud. You're like, oh my God, I got to take it off and do a tooth. So you try and take it off and do a tooth. Now, one tooth over, now it's smacking down here. And so you never have enough. So how do you fix that? I know some people will take a Dremel and just grind this out. You can get in that situation if the drive gear was not put on correctly. If you take the drive gear off and rotate it 180 degrees, it's the same thing as moving it half a tooth over. And the reason why I say that is because if you were to look at this, yeah, this piece, if I went straight across, it looks like that. So on one side, you're right in between teeth, and on this side, you're at a tooth. So if you take it off and rotate it 180, it's the same thing as moving it half a tooth over. And so if it doesn't go in those slots, take the gear off, rotate it 180, it will work just fine. All right, what else I got to say about magnetos? Ignition harness. Ignition harness, the number one cylinders always marked in some fashion, especially with slicks. They have a little number one on them. I appreciate those. They're the best. I don't think Bendix always does that, but all new harnesses down in the end, the nut, will have something on there where it'll say, T1, B1, T2, B2. It's going to say something like that. All right? You'd never have a harness that has a T1 and a B1. So somebody laughed, you got it. Because one cylinder is going to have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. You can't have 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. All right, so on the nut, it will usually have something like that. That one goes in the top of number 1, and then maybe the next one says this, and that goes bottom of number 2. Okay. Trust but verify. we had a freshly overhauled engine. I had nothing to do with this. And the customer called and I just feel like this engine should be producing more power than it's producing. It's a fresh engine. It just feels a little weak. Yeah, we'll bring it on in. We'll take a look at it. So he brought it in, and what it was, I guess, a C85 engine. C85. They had a C85-12 and a C85-8. And the 12 had a starter, and the 8s did not. Well, it wasn't that they just left the starter off. They put a different kind of accessory case on the back, and the way the magneto was driven was different. So on the C85-12s, I don't remember if it was like that had left-hand rotating mags, and the Dash 8 had right-hand rotating mags. So the correct mags were obviously installed, but the harness was wrong. They had got a harness for like a Dash 12. So if we did it like this, so we'll say this is the first one to fire, that's the second one to fire, that's the third to fire, that's a fourth to fire. If it's a right-hand mag, hopefully you guys are following me. If it's a left-hand rotating mag, then this is the 1, then this is the 2, this is the 3, and that's the 4. That's the order in which it's going to fire, right? So one of them's going this way, one of them's going that way. Well, when they ordered the harness, they got one for a Dash 12. And so this wire came off, and it said 1. Let me see. So we got one supposed to go left. So it's supposed to go right. So this one would have said it should go to, it's the second one to fire, so it goes to 1. So that one went to 3. This is what it says on it. That one says 3. This one says 1, 3, 2. This one said it goes to number 4. Everybody follow so far?
Yeah.
That's what it said on the end of the harness. That's where you put it. So the mechanic said, this one says, we'll say tops. It's all said tops. Top 1. And the next one, this is top 3. This is top. Well, it wasn't. It was a harness that was made for a left-hand rotating engine. So it was wrong. So which cylinders were actually firing? Well, 1 went to 1, which was good because 1 works, so that one checked out fine. 2 went to, yeah. So, well, anyways, 2 and 4 were correct because it's 1,
So 3 and
yeah, 1, 3, 2. Oh, 2 would have been right. 1, 3, 2, 4. 1, 3, 2, 4. So it was the 1 and the 2 were correct. So it's running on 2 cylinders. Yeah, you think it wasn't producing a lot of power? Guy was flying around that way.
That's amazing.
What's amazing is they couldn't catch it. They troubleshot this thing for like 2 days.
Yeah.
And then finally one day I said, well, I don't know, it's a Dash 8. They're pretty rare. You sure the leads are going to the right cylinders? What do you mean leads are going to the right cylinders? Yeah, we verified it like 6 times. The 1's going to the 1. The 2's going to the 2. I'm like, no. The differences are going to go different. So that means the 1 and the 2 are correct, but the 3 and the 4 are the wrong spots. Because you ordered the wrong part number harness. See what I'm saying? The only difference in the harness part numbers between the Dash 8 and the Dash 12 were just the number stamped on it. So they swapped them. It ran real well after that.
how would you miss that if you just held the spark plug up to like the edge of the case and just or not the spark plug?
How would you miss it because you didn't verify?
Sorry.
You didn't verify. And this is just part of being an aircraft mechanic. You never just take things at face value. So when you're building an engine, when you're putting a harness on, 100% of the time you should go, okay, there's the number 1. I've got it. And you pull it out and you run it around and you set it on the number 1 spark plug. And then you go to the back of the magneto and go, which one should fire next? And you grab it and you say, this one should have a 3 on it. And you pull it out and go, it doesn't. Stop. Why doesn't this have a 3? Am I screwed up today? Do I need to take a break? Or is this thing wrong? Always check every single little thing. And that just prevents that from happening. That's just part of being an aircraft mechanic. Just always got to think the next thing through. Think about, the parts you're getting. How are we doing? It's break time. Okay. can hear by the yawns it's break time.
Everybody's leaned back in their seat.
I'm not writing enough. You're not scared enough.